Check, check. Can you hear me, guys? Everybody online? Angie, I see you. Give me a thumbs up.
We can hear you, just can't see
All
you.
right. We are going to get started here in about 2 minutes. Our lunch sponsor did not make it.
Where you're like, yes, we don't change anyway.
Let me see. I'm going to upload a file in the Zoom chat. If you guys want to grab that file, where's the chat at? Here it is. All right, everybody on Zoom, I just uploaded the document we're going to be looking at. It's a bunch of one page out of appraisals. We're going to be taking a look at some appraisals today. So, all right, Lisa, Haley, Brandy, everybody there?
Yeah.
Oh, I should probably turn on the video. There we go. Ha! Now I see y'all. And I'm gonna share my screen Zoom, so don't worry about it, but I don't have anything to share right now. I'm just gonna be talking for a little bit, and then once we start looking at stuff online, I will share that screen with you. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank y'all for braving the rain today. When it started raining this morning, I was like, nobody's coming to class. Everybody's gonna just crawl back into bed and work on their computers. So for those, I see some new faces. My name is Keith Bonham. I'm the educational director and one of the instructors here at the Real School. I appreciate everybody hanging out. Quick side note, we do have an in-person ethics class this afternoon from 1 to 5. If you need your ethics requirement, I'll probably have one more class in December that'll be online. But the deadline is December 31st during this 3-year cycle with the NAR. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, please see me after the class, then we'll get you checked out. But basically the NAR requires ethics every 3 years. And the good news is if you take your ethics, you also get 4 hours of your CE elective for the 24-25 licensing year. So I just want to let everybody know that. So today we're going to talk about some tips and tricks for doing a CMA, or basically determining a list price for a home. I apologize, I'm not big on PowerPoint because I feel like I just am saying the same thing that's on the PowerPoint. So instead I try to do more talking. If you guys have questions about anything, want me to stop and go over more stuff, just let me know. We'll start off basically by reminding everybody, if you took your Gen Up or BIC Up last year, the Real Estate Commission wants everybody to know that, let me move over so I'm in the actual camera. The Real Estate Commission wants everybody to know that they do not want us using the word value when we're sitting with the seller. They never want us to say, hey, we think your home's value is X, or your home, whatever. The only people that technically can use that term is an appraiser, if you remember that from Gen Up and BIC Up.
What do they want to see?
So Keith,
probable selling price, possible selling price, possible list price, but they just never want you, because we're not licensed appraisers, and they are the only ones that can quote unquote determine a value of a home. And just know that the appraisers go through licensing, they go through hours and hours of apprenticeships and have a big manual that they have to follow. So that's the good news. The bad news, or for lack of a better term, bad news, the frustrating news, I'll say, is that they are human. You could have 10 different appraisers come in and they can give you 10 different values. What you're hoping is that those values are going to be within the same ballpark. But at the same time, once again, we're not talking about home values. We're talking about, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is what we think you should list your home for, or what we think the best selling price for your home would be. And it's not just going to be based on comps. It's going to be based on market conditions. Obviously, just because a home is valued X according to an appraiser doesn't mean it's necessarily going to sell for that much, if that makes sense, because obviously there's ebbs and flows in the market. In this market, obviously we're chasing prices down. So, just because something was worth or sold for, 300,000 last month doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to price the next home in the neighborhood accordingly. We have to make sure what the market conditions are. When I started, and I know there's some experienced agents in here. I was joking with one of the agents in the office yesterday. So when I started out, I'm actually celebrating my 10-year anniversary next year, so I'm excited. When I started out as a new agent, kind of like you all, I didn't know how to price a home or, determine a list price, because what they taught you was they're taking home, your subject property, they call it, and they're trying to make it as if that subject property was this other property. How much would it sell for? And they're going to make adjustments based on square footage, whether or not it has a country front porch or not, the location, of course, how many bedrooms, bathrooms, there's all kinds of stuff. And I literally, and you can tell me your experience, I'll call you out because I know you've been in the game a little while. When you started out, how were you taught? I literally was given a copy of a copy of a copy of a list of basically adjustments. And it said, fireplace, $2,000.
Actually, that was good. I started with Coldwell Banker at the time, and they literally had a list where it was like, if you're on the golf course side, deduct to add 10,000, whatever. Like they give you that, and I love that actually.
Yeah.
I even argue with my appraisers all the time. I wish we kind of had something that in general, because I feel like that's where the problem lies, because everybody, like you just said, 5 different appraisers can come in and they can give you a different value. So it'd be nice to have something that real estate agents are on the same page as the appraisers.
And the scary part is that, it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
And as you said, there was a list that they had that was concrete of, okay, if it's this, it's this, if it's that, it's that. However, the way the appraisers have to work when they go in is they have to treat that as a mini market, so to speak. So if, let's use a fireplace, for example, if a fireplace in one house sold with a fireplace and then the other house didn't have a fireplace and it was only $1,000 difference in that neighborhood, that's what they're going to treat it as. So it's that's where you have to have flexibility and realize that you have to do digging kind of like an appraiser does and pull the comp. So that's why I wanted to actually get some appraisals in front of you all, just to kind of show you some of the stuff that they're looking at and some of the deductions and what they're making adjustments for. And then when you all are out there and you have a possible listing, you could kind of mirror and use this and say, oh yeah, we talked about this was this much deduction, and you can kind of frame where you think the best list price was. Before we get into that, another tip or trick, would you rather list a home for $500,000 or $499,999? Does anybody?
499.
Because
Well, maybe the way people search.
of the psychological, right?
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, the argument, and like I said, I'm just throwing out what I've heard on both sides, and that's what I've heard is, okay, just like people do at Walmart or the grocery store, it's never a round number. It's never $4. It's $3.99. It's $3.99. The other half of the argument is what happens if there is somebody who has a search set up for 500 to 550,000. Will they see your house at $499.99? Now, like I said, I'm not saying one way is better than the other.
You can go in and look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? That's one of the ways I've done it. So when I'm talking about tips and tricks of listing prices, so, for example, if I come out to determine a list price is somewhere around, say $495, I may say, well, to increase the audience for this home or increase the eyes that are going to go on this home, instead of listing it for $495, maybe we should list it for $500 to capture that other segment of the people looking in that $5 to $550 range. So let's look at some of these appraisals. I did mark out the sensitive information, so we cannot. Oh. Let me get these people in. Admit. And I'm gonna give them. Second. All right, for those on Zoom that just joined, I am sending the document we're looking at right now is a bundle of a couple appraisals. So if you want to, on Zoom, if you want to click on that link in the chat box that I just sent, and you can download the document we're going to look at, and then I'll share my screen in a little bit here. All right. So I pulled a couple of appraisals that I have. I really encourage you guys to keep your old appraisals just for this specific reason. I pull old appraisals a lot of times just to remind myself of what deductions or additions were made, or if there's a, you know, a scenario where, for example, one I have right now doesn't have a driveway. It has a gravel driveway. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. The first thing I want you to see on this first page is they're going to pull a lot of information from the area. So I thought that it was pretty interesting on this one, and we'll see some other ones that are a little different. But at the very, very top, it's saying that there's 47 comparable properties in the subject neighborhood for sale between 650 and 850. 47 is quite a bit. I don't know if that means the specific neighborhood or, you know, where they're pulling the comps from. And then it talks about 212 and then the price between those as well. All right, we're going to talk about some adjustments. It's going to tell you what the sales price of the subject is, and then the three comparables there, the sales prices of those. And that's where they're going to start their adjustments and additions and subtractions. If you look at the first one that I have a asterisk by is location. This was interesting because if you look at the addresses, the first comp they pulled was in Willow Spring, and then the other two comps they pulled were in Fuquay Varina. I am assuming that those were in city limits, and that's why they did such a big deduction. If you notice, they did a $50,000 deduction for the location on that. And we're going to see some other deductions here in a minute for some other location related stuff. The view kind of also related to the location. The subject property, if you see that busy, that means busy road. So it backed up actually to a main busy road. And because of that, this first comparable did not back up to a busy road. It was in the neighborhood. There was a $5,000 deduction for that. That's a very common question that I see on a lot of the Facebook pages. I see on a lot of, you know, people have is how much of a deduction I'm going to get for my, you know, the house backing up to the busy street. So that just kind of gives you some insight on that. The other comparable actually had a water view. So they did the deduction for not being on a busy road and another deduction for not having water view. And then there's design, there's quality of construction. The quality of construction is sometimes you'll see deductions on that. This one, of course, they got them all. They were probably all determined to be the same quality. I was interested to see that they did not do a deduction for age on the second, considering that the subject was 8 years newer. And then we get into the deductions for gross living area. If you notice, the subject is 3,650 square feet. And then they did the subject or comparable one was right around 3,200. So they did a $6,000 credit, so to speak, for the subject property because it is larger. That was one of the things I've always struggled with is, and you ask appraisers and they kind of have different formulas, is how are you going to adjust for the extra square footage? Because you can't really put in $213 a square foot, which was the sale price of this home. You can't put that in as the difference because you're going to get like $60,000. So there's formulas that they use, and you can kind of look at those and say, okay, there's a 450 square foot difference and they did 6,000 and kind of make your ratios that way. Do we have any questions so far? Zoom, we good? All right. Moving along, they have heating and cooling, energy efficiency. Another common question is garages and how much value they add. In this case, there was a extra garage, so it was a bay garage and 2 spots in the driveway. And they actually gave a $15,000 credit to the subject property because it had an extra garage. That's one of the ones that usually gets questioned quite a bit. No garage versus garage, and then sometimes the amount of bays in the garage. Same thing goes with your country front porches, screen porches. As you see in this one, the subject had a screen porch and a country front porch. That was the same in comparable 1.
Thank you.
No problem. And it was not the same in comparable 2. It just had a small porch deck, so they gave a $2,000 credit for that country porch. So it just kind of shows you the stuff that you can, when you're starting to look at subject properties of, okay, if this one doesn't have this and this one did, I remember those appraisals I looked at, those are the adjustments that we can make. Does that make sense to everybody? No,
Yeah,
totally.
can I chime in?
Absolutely. I need some help.
Did you talk, so one thing, and then again, this is something that's not very measurable, but I heard you talking about like extra garage bays and things like
Yeah.
that. So some of the other things to take into consideration that I tell clients are, what is the marketing value of something? So yes, we know some of these numbers are, there's not an exact number. All appraisers would tell you it depends. It depends on how much value they're going to give a garage or how much value they're going to give a pool. But I think it's important to know your market. And things that are very important and what's going on in the market right now. So for instance, back in the day, and you've probably heard me use this analogy before, but back in the day, we would tell you pool really doesn't have a ton of value because if somebody really wants a pool, then they're going to be willing to pay for it. But if they don't want a pool, it's more of a detriment. However, enter COVID, when all of a sudden people were members of HOAs, of community pools, and the pool shut down, and then they had nowhere to go. They had nothing to do with their kids. All of a sudden, you can talk to any pool company and they have been slammed ever since COVID. That has not changed. Yeah, exactly. It has not changed. They have not slowed down. And so what we saw were literally during COVID, people calling like, if you have a pool, I will buy your house. I don't care what it costs. And so they went from something that was kind of like, meh, you're having to convince, sellers that they're not going to get, nearly dollar for dollar value back to good news. If you have a pool, we are cream of the crop. And I would say that's still probably 65% true. We're not seeing homes with pools move quite as fast. But again, things like that are unique. Additional garages are always going to be something. That's 9 times out of 10. If a house is going to sell, if it's got an additional garage, the buyer's going to tell you because it had that additional garage. And so what I tell my clients is I can't necessarily get you dollar for dollar value, but what we call this is marketing value, which means a buyer is more than likely going to choose your home over another home that doesn't have it.
Yeah.
So-
And also keep in mind when, in this case, an adjustment for an extra garage was $15,000, but you also take into consideration this is an $800,000 house. An extra garage on a $350,000 or $400,000 house
Oh.
may not be the same adjustment though. It may be half of that. You see what I'm saying? It's all, it's all relative to the neighborhood. Once again, you're taking it into a mini market, so to speak. And, obviously in this appraiser's, in their experience in this area, that price house, an extra garage bay, that's how much an adjustment they're making.
Well, and in that situation, that's a good point. So when you are in a neighborhood where there's a lot of additional detached garages, I'm gonna use Wellesley down here as an example. When Mungo first started building a home with an attached and a separate detached garage, they were making $1 million off these upgrades, to be honest, because everybody's like, oh my gosh, I can have that extra 2-car detached garage. And so it was a really big anomaly. And so they sold really fast. And then it got to be, okay, every house now has the additional detached garage. So it kind of took away the novelty of it. And you saw their sales slow down. But then if you have a resale out there and it doesn't have the detached garage, it's almost like it's a detriment. Does that,
Yeah.
So it's one of those where you have to take everything in as a whole. I just listed a manufactured home on not quite an acre. I have another manufactured home almost the same size in another area, and it has a detached garage with three doors and one that's a large roll-up door. And so I'm like, an appraiser is not going to give that building nearly the value that I gave it in my marketing number, if that makes sense. And you have to explain that to a seller, you have to explain it to a buyer. That listen, an appraiser may not think this building is worth $30,000, but to my buyer who works on cars, guess what? It's worth a lot
Absolutely,
to him.
absolutely.
So again, that's marketing value as to why I pushed the envelope on my pricing just a little bit, but I'm also prepared that the appraisal may not reflect that because an appraiser doesn't care. Their job is to evaluate it on what's on the site. So all that to say, there are things to take into consideration when you're doing a market analysis, not
Yeah.
just what an appraiser will say,
Yeah.
but what the market will dictate.
Yeah.
That's all I'm done thinking.
You're good. Thank you. And we're not gonna go over, there's 4 appraisals here. I'm not gonna go over all of them, but I wanted you guys to have this in case you hadn't, don't have a copy of an appraisal, so you can kind of see some of the adjustments. But if you want to flip to the next page real quick, just remember some of the numbers we were talking about on the other page. It had 47 comparable properties. This next one only had 6. This was down in Lillington. This one I wanted to show you, they did actually do an adjustment for the actual age of the home versus the subject or versus the comps. 10 years older was a $6,000 adjustment. They did some adjustments for the gross living area. They did some adjustments for the driveway. In this case, just as I said, it's like magic. If you look at that garage carport deduction, that was a 3-car garage. We're talking about half the house, and they did half the deduction. They did a $7,500 deduction rather than a $15,000. So it kind of just reiterated my point of, it's all relative to the price of the home. So you guys have these. I'll leave y'all with those. Let me make sure there wasn't anything else. On the next one on page 3, if you go down to the view, this actually shows a deduction from a comparable or a credit for the comp on comparable 1 because the comparable was located near railroad tracks. Another common question, one I did not have that I do know that they do give a credit for or deduction for would be location on a cul-de-sac versus, the main part of a neighborhood on the main drag. So these are all things, like I said, you could keep this. You could do your, due diligence when you're looking to help a seller determine a list price of their property. And you can kind of, use your property and then the comparables around there and make the adjustments based on that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of work through one.
Do you have a better tool? Like what tools?
And we're going to go through. So
There's so many different ones.
Yeah. One thing I want to circle back around and say is I will be the first person to tell you that doing a CMA in a neighborhood, Angie, I'll get right to you in 1 second, all right? Doing a CMA in a neighborhood is extremely easy. Well, I won't say it's extremely easy. It's a lot easier than doing a CMA for a rural home down off Cleveland School Road, because for lack of a better term, you're dealing with, cookie cutter houses in a neighborhood. You can pull 2 to 3 comps out of a neighborhood easily in most cases, just because that's your mini market is that neighborhood. When you're dealing with a rural home, maybe a home on a main road, it's going to get a little more difficult. I'll be the first person to tell you, I have literally gone and talked to a seller and used a script that, hey, your house is so unique that I just really don't feel comfortable or don't want to lose sleep not knowing that we were actually where we should have been. So I've literally offered to pay for an appraisal up front. If you list your home with me and it sells, you just credit me back that money for that appraisal, at the end of the transaction. And that way you can go to sleep at night knowing that we didn't leave any money on the table. Because there's some properties that they're just, it's just going to be close to impossible. And I feel bad for the appraisers, but it's their job. But there's sometimes you just, there's properties out there that are unique like that you may not be able to find comps for. So, that's something I've used in the past. And it's just one of those things that, I shoot straight with the seller and say, look, I'm not comfortable because it is such a unique property. It has these features that I know have value, and I don't know how an appraiser, is going to react to those. So let's get one out here. The part, if you do go that route, an appraiser is not going to give you a solid value. They're going to give you a range. That is just the way they work when they do those type of appraisals. Not for a lender, for, a private, that's just been in my experience. So they'll say, we think that the listing value range for this home is, between 380 and 400. So it at least will shrink down and give you a ballpark to work with.
there's an agent I know that she does that for every single property she lists.
Yeah.
I asked her why, and she told me it's because, you know how sometimes when you're listing a property, you'll get pushback because the sellers, they have all these different values in their head.
Yeah, Zillow.
Yeah, estimate, maybe their like attachment to the house, what that house 3 blocks over got, you know, they have all these ideas in their head. And she feels like it limits going back and forth with them when
It's pretty solid. I mean, it's just what the professional said. And then, you know, you could also use that in your marketing. Now, sometimes that could backfire on you, but you know, Angie, what did you have for me? Unmute real quick.
Yeah. Hey, Keith, just going back to page 1, I was just looking, so let's see, just for example, like the first, comparable, it
Yeah.
looks like they're giving a value for the room counts and the square footage.
I believe, now this is a conversation I had with I did a refi a couple years back, and I had an appraiser come over to the house because they send the appraiser over to the house. And I asked them because we are on I guess this isn't the same question. My mind dealing was with, we have 4 bedrooms, but we're on a 3-bedroom septic. And I asked the appraiser, hey, would it be worth me upgrading, you know, if and when we decide to sell, would it be worth me upgrading the septic system to be able to advertise that 4th bedroom? And he said it wouldn't be worth it because you're going to get the value out of the size of the home, the square footage of the home.
Mm-hmm.
So in short, Angie, it may be a combination of the two. I think it falls more on the actual square footage and number of bedrooms. Now, in that case, with that first comparable, there's 2 extra bedrooms on top of that, you know, 450 square feet, which is giving you 2 extra rooms. So it may just be a culmination of all of it. I hope that helps you a little.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just looking at the appraisals, it's always just interesting. But then if you go to page 2, so the basically the first comparable, it's kind of interesting. They get the room count of $750.
Yep, I see what you're saying because of the extra room. And I'm trying to think about this house, and I think, if I remember correctly, this house, and it may be adjusted because of it. And it's weird because the other 2 don't get an adjustment for having the extra room. So I'm assuming that extra room was possibly an office or a bonus room.
Or the half bath, no.
So.
Yeah, but then even like a half bath, if you're looking at the second comparable, like the first comparable does not have a half bath. Second comparable does have a half bath.
Yeah, so you could pull your hair out.
Yeah.
You're gonna start pulling your hair out, Andy. So, but yeah, I mean, sometimes there isn't rhyme or reason. I've never had to ask, you know, I'm gonna take some of these notes and ask, you know, next time I do have an appraisal, if I can get a hold of the appraiser, hey, what, you know, why was this adjustment made? Yeah.
Keith, out of curiosity, where did you get, I mean, is that something that's available to us? Because I've never seen where there's something out there that says, give this amount of money for a room, or give this amount of money
for. In the very beginning. Okay. You know, when I started out, I was just given basically a copy of a copy of a copy of a list.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now I remember you
just
guys
every
saying
brokerages may provide it. I think the best thing is just to start keeping your old appraisals to see the actual adjustments that they're doing.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right. So we're going to share screen. All right. So what we talked about, I will get an appraisal done if it's unique. So I like to do, the way I like to work is, you asked if there's other tools. I'll use RPR. I'll use the other one. I can't think of the name of it for whatever reason. The MLS tax suites, we'll use that one. But what I like to do first is I will go in, take my subject, determine where I think the list price is going to be in, and then what I call it is checking my work using these automated value machines, whatever AVM, to see, okay, if I think it's going to sell for 400, and I go into RPR and I go into the data, and they both tell me, you know, 405, 390, I know I'm at least in the ballpark. Right. If I go in there and you know, we're off by 70, 80 grand. Sometimes that's on me. A lot of times it's on the actual algorithm from whatever we're using. All right, so let me share the screen.
Okay, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
We were talking about AI earlier. Do you know of, or does anybody know of any AI platforms that are preparing home valuations? I'm sure they're out there.
I'm sure they'll be coming.
I think you could.
I think they're out there already. Yeah, because I mean, I've seen listing presentations on AI. I've seen, you know, the obvious bios. And
Yeah.
stuff like that. So
All right, Zoom, can you guys, am I sharing my screen? Is that correct? You guys see MLS Tax Suite?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. All right, who wants to throw an address out? Somebody want to have an address coming up they want to try to determine the list price for, neighbor's house? Anybody?
I have a unique one that
I don't want to do unique. I don't want to do unique one. I don't want a hard one with something.
I've got one in a subdivision.
All right, throw me an address. We'll try to work it out.
Okay, hold on, let me pull it up
We will,
real
we got
fast.
time.
I think
Say it
it's
again?
27
Is it Wake or
North-
Johnston County?
Johnston County.
Well, I'm in the wrong thing. Go ahead.
27 North Hawks Ridge Lane in Smithfield.
I'm gonna plug in here. Wouldn't that be a disaster? All right, here we go. All right, so I'm sorry, Haley, say that again.
That's okay. 27 North Hawks Ridge Lane.
Fox, F-O-X.
HAWKS.
Oh.
Hawks Ridge Lane in Smithfield.
Okay. This one right here, is that correct? One of these two here? That
Yes.
closed in February 2024. Okay, so we have started out. This is how I would go
Yep.
about. So I look up the original address. We got it up, boom. I found the last time it sold. And this is assuming that
It's the
it
one
wasn't
that it's the
sold 25
431.
years ago and it's actually in the MLS. So
Yeah.
it closed and I'll pull up that one. The first thing I'll do is I'll usually just print out the sheet. So I have a physical copy in front of me, but I won't do that now. And then right here on the screen, that's where I go into, you'll go into RPR and go into the MLS Tax Suite. But before I do any of that, I will go over here. Okay, I will go in and let's see, Red Hawk Landing. So we're gonna pull the subdivision because that's where the appraiser would start with their search, is obviously comps in the neighborhood.
I wish they put the documents, the past documents back into the MLS. Because that's really hurting a lot of people.
Yeah. All right. So right now I know, so I put Red Hawk Landing in. There's one house for sale or it's pending, and then we're going to put closed in, and then I'm going to start 6 months back. So 6 months back, there's been 2 sales in the neighborhood. That's enough for me because that'll give me at least 2 comps, hopefully. If this came back and it still said 1, I may go back 12 months, at least to get a baseline. Now I know that the market's changed quite a bit in 12 months, but at least it'll say, okay, these are what they were selling for 12 months ago. So we're gonna hit search. And keep in mind, we do have the subject property. Go back to the subject real quick. And so this is a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 3 full bath, 2,300 square feet. So go back to our list. We've got a 4-bedroom, 3 bath, 2,300 square feet, and then a 6-bedroom, 3 bath. That's quite a bit larger. But what I will say is on some of these, if you go back and look, especially on the last one, they actually did a 1,000 square foot larger home on the last page of the appraisal thing. So sometimes you'll have to go that high up. But what we're gonna say is, we're gonna assume that this one right here,
So for less though.
yeah. Well, I have a feeling that,
it's bigger.
yes. Well, that's what happens.
Yeah.
So, let's see.
It's a bad content.
We may have to do a different one, but then we'll keep chugging with this one. So this comp right here, and I keep forgetting exactly what the square footage is, and I hate these new, I haven't gotten used to finding them. So 2,300, 4-bed, 3-bath. Twenty-three bedroom, 4-bed, 3. All right, so this is a perfect comp. And it sold for 485. And we are listed, or I'm sorry, not listed. This last sold in February of this year for 450. So obviously there's been an increase in market value, so
Market slowed down now
Yeah.
compared to February.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, or it was still a good market.
so now what I'll do is, okay, this is a little tough where, and I need to take out I need to take out that I don't know that it sold for 450, because that's kind of on my mind. So now we're just assuming that right now our list price is going to be somewhere around 485.
Somebody wants them.
Oh. So now I'll go out and I'll start a new search. And we're going to put, what we said, 2,300 was the living area. So I'll usually start with a small gap and test and see if we pull any comps outside of the neighborhood. So I'll do, let's say 2,100 to 2,500 square feet. And I will even bump it down to a minimum of 3 bedrooms. Just for the same thing we were talking about earlier, because you may be on a septic with a 4-bedroom house and they just had to advertise it as 3-bedroom. And then what is the address here? 27. And what we're going to do is everybody still with me? We're going to go up here to the search by map. We're going to drop a pin right there. And then we're going to do, we'll start with a 3-mile radius. And right now we don't have anything closed. We have active and contingent. Let me put closed. And what I'll do is I'll do closed first, because the other thing I like to do, obviously, as we talked about, market conditions, if, we go in there and we saw that within 3 miles, there's, I think, 17 houses for sale. If obviously we need to list the house competitively in that market as well. So does that make sense? Yeah. So we're going to do that same. We're going to do 6 months back. All right, we got 12. The one thing I did not look for. That comparable is a ranch, I believe. Okay. So let me put that in there just to see, because we want to eliminate the differences between ranch and multi-story.
Now you're back to 0.
Yeah, possibly. And this is something that drives me crazy too. So if you have a ranch home, that's a 1-story home, right? People are listing ranch in 1 story and won't list the other one. So if I put search in for ranch, we only get 2 houses. I'm willing to bet. Oh, did it take 1 story away? I've taken 1 story away.
Well, I just had a problem on this on my listing, because when you put like story where it says stories, when you're putting in the listing management and you do 1.5, it kept changing it on me. It wouldn't, I had to literally remove it because it kept putting like 2 on there or whatever. And I said, I'm not gonna get in trouble for saying 2 when it's 1.5.
It's not even letting me put 1 story in anymore.
No, I hate it.
Huh. Has anybody else ran into that recently?
Just have to put ranch. I tried even calling, MLS.
All right, we'll do ranch because it at least gave us two more. So let's see what those two ended up selling for. All right. So one of them obviously was the comp from the neighborhood. The other one was a little larger, a little newer, but sold for 465. So you see how we're gonna probably pull that one, and then we'll start looking at the features and then start making adjustments like that. Does that make sense to everybody? And then if, maybe that's not enough, I'll go in here and I'll tweak. Okay, let's drop it to 2,000 and 2,400, or I'm sorry, 2,500. No, where were we? 23, 2,600. That added another one. Let's see if that helps us out at all. Okay, that does not help at all. That was a 165. Let me see something real quick. Let's take ranch out. Just on the pictures, I bet most of them are. Yeah, it looks like most of them are. What's this one? The other thing I want you all to note, and this is just me thinking out loud. So we did a 3-mile radius around this, around this neighborhood, put all the different attributes that matched up with our subject. The comp, I want you guys to notice one thing, this comp down here that's covered up by this is actually the comp from the neighborhood. And it is the most expensive comp in this whole list in 3 miles. So what does that tell you about this neighborhood? It's probably one of the high-end neighborhoods in the area. So that's something else that, you may want to have a conversation with your seller about. It may affect days on market. It may be on days on market a little longer because it is a more expensive home in an area where there are cheaper options or cheaper new construction options, stuff like that. Try to move this over.
Have you used that quick CMA?
Yeah, I'm about to do it right now. I just wanted to kind of get to this point. So we have one in the neighborhood for 485. We had one outside the neighborhood for 465. So we're assuming right now our list price is going to be somewhere in that area. So let's just skip ahead. Let's decide that we, did some adjustments and we came to right in the middle at 475. That's when I'll jump in here and I'll say, okay, well, let's see what these two are going to give me. Or I'm looking at the wrong one. I'm sorry. Okay. So we'll do RPR first because the MLS tax suite has quite a few other different options. It's not going to find it for me now. Okay, we'll start with MLS tax suite. So that was the wrong one again. Oh, I keep pulling the comp. My fault. Okay, sorry. I am confusing myself. My fault, guys. All right. Now, so we'll do RPR first. And then we'll come back to it. Is it still not going to give me? Or am I clicking on the wrong one? Market trends. Okay. There are 4 different RPR buttons down there. I was clicking on the wrong one. All right. So we thought somewhere around 475. RPR is saying that it's 446, and you can go right here and you can click view details to see, okay, well, where did you come up with this from? And it's telling you that they're pretty confident about this. However, you see that they are giving you a range up here from 419 to 472. And keep in mind in the back of your head what we said about the one comp is the most expensive house in a 3-mile radius. So that tells you that we still may be pretty solid being at 475, because this is telling you that they think the range is somewhere to the 470s. And if our, hypothesis is true about this being one of the more expensive neighborhoods in the area, then of course it's going to be towards the higher part of the scale. So then you scroll down here and it will say, okay, well, we use these properties to determine that. And it's kind of interesting that they did use 2 properties that closed in the neighborhood, 465 and 485, and somehow it still came up with 446. I don't know if the fact that it closed in February for 430 is somehow, adjusting the algorithm, but obviously if these are the 2 comparables in the neighborhood, I think that this is probably going to be a little off at 446. And we're going to come back because they have a quick CMA in here that you can kind of do a report with that. And then the other thing it'll do is it'll take properties from outside of the neighborhood or off-market properties that it's basically using these numbers right here are their automated value for those houses. So it's not really using true numbers, it's using values that they're coming up with from their algorithm. But it's saying that this one is worth 480, 460, 342. And it really seems like that, like I said, I think that it's getting skewed because once again, I think it's one of the more expensive neighborhoods in the area. So now we're going to go back to MLS Tax Suite, and this is going to give us some other data. It has the same picture. You go over here to comparables and go to quick CMA, and it's going to give us a couple different, and of course it's not going to work this time, but it gives you a couple different values up here. It'll give you an average cost per square foot of the market. It'll give you a value based on, or a listing value or listing price based on a house price index. We'll talk about that in a second. They have average sales price to tax appraisal ratio, and then they have this estimate. I think because this is such a new home that they're not willing to throw any values out there. So we're not going to get much from this. The one thing I will say is I've used this in the past, the average sales price to tax appraisal ratio. Basically, the way I've used that in the past is you take your comp or you take your subject property, and we all know that the sales price of a home around here is way drastically different most of the time from the tax value if it's been a little while from the time that we've done adjustments for tax values. So we'll take the subject property, the sale, or the, where you think the listing price is going to be. So we'll just say if the, potential listing price is 500,000 and the tax value is 400,000, we'll make that into a ratio, 5/4, and then we'll use that ratio against the subject properties. And that's another way I usually go in and check my work. Does that make sense? So you could look and say, okay, well, if this one sold for 525 and it's $25,000 more in tax value, then I know that's lining up pretty good. It doesn't always line up like that, but it's a good way to, to check and say, okay, does this really make sense that, that this house sold for this much in the ratio? So unfortunately, we didn't get much out of the North Hawks Ridge Lane. We're going to circle back around really quick so I could show you how to put one of these into a report. So we're going to go back to RPR.
I have a question real
Yeah.
quick. Is that quick CMA that you just did through the tax suite?
Yep.
Is that the same one that if you go back to the MLS dashboard, it's different, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, you
You're
see
talking about the
that
easy
one up
CMA.
top, the easy CMA? I like just looking at that as well too, only because you can, put some adjustments in there.
Mhm.
And it lets you see the homes right there in the area, and then you can kind of pick and choose.
It actually lets you put a collaborative link together.
Yeah.
You can send your seller. a
Yes, which
All
is
right.
very nice and simple too.
file. Yeah,
Um,
I just used it on a buyer.
So we
Yeah.
just,
put the address and see, it'll show you like
Yep.
all the comps in there and you can put your thing and then you can delete
You
what
can
you don't.
adjust.
yep,
And then you can go in there and set up that whole thing for your adjustments based on what you think in there. Like the product.
yeah, and you could basically refer back to
the
the appraisals that I gave you and said, okay,
Right.
well, this one has a country front porch, this one has a deck, this one doesn't,
Right,
I did one for a buyer that we offered on property and I did my initial CMA the way you're walking through. it.
Yeah.
And then I went back to this.
Oh, yeah.
CMA and checked my work.
Yeah, that's the way I like to do it. I like to kind of determine what I think. Cause I mean, granted, technology is great,
Yeah.
but sometimes, like I said, your market better than the computer knows it.
Right.
I mean, granted, it does have a lot of data, but you still know it at least slightly better because you're in the market.
and I don't know if, do you do your
Oh.
square footage or do you have an appraiser go
I-
do your square?
I
footage?
do, I get it measured.
You do them?
Yeah.
You
No,
get,
no,
you hire an
yeah,
appraiser to do it?
yeah.
I always highly suggest, I tell all the new agents coming in, be in that relationship with that your appraiser, right? You pay them to do your square footage and stuff. Sometimes when I have something very unique and I want to know kind of what it is, like what would an appraiser? Now, like we said earlier, 10 appraisers will give you 10 different things, but if they're really good, they'll give you that feedback. They'll let you know, this is what we will do in that situation. And it helps you then determine a price on
Yeah.
something unique.
Yeah, I haven't dug into this. I'm gonna do a class on this too. I haven't really, I dabbled with it a little bit, but yeah.
And it's really
Yeah, I like
nice and very short for,
Yeah.
especially sent out to clients.
So on RPR real quick, because we are running out of time, let me show you all this real quick. You can go to CMA on RPR. If what RPR says actually makes sense to what you think it is, I'll use that. It will let you make adjustments on, I'm sorry, let me back up. If you go to the sales comparison analysis, it'll let you make more adjustments. If you just go to comparative analysis, it's basing it on the comps that they provide. Like I said, I know that it's a little off, but I just kind of wanted to show you what it looks like and what you could produce for your sellers. So you could find comps and same as same as the other one, you can kind of pick out which one's in the area. You could adjust how far you're going back. Back to January.
Have you ever, do you use RPR to send the seller like a report? It's pretty excellent.
Yeah, sometimes I will, sometimes I'll bring them. They are very robust and you'll see here in a second.
Very comprehensive.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna pick a couple. So this says just based on that run comp, the value is 481. You go to create reports. And it gives you all these different options. And if you can't see, that first property report is 28 pages. The seller's report is 81 pages. I mean, they're very robust. So they have mini reports for 12 pages, but it's going to basically look a lot like that first page we looked at that has a picture of the home, the value, and all that stuff on there. But yeah, I'm going to start messing with it. I like this quick CMA one. I didn't like, the reason I kind of was hesitant is because I did not like the old CMA builder, that it just was very archaic. But yeah, that's a little more user friendly and a lot easier to pick properties and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, because you can go right back to the, MLS and look and see in that neighborhood or outside the neighborhood and what they picked and then just delete it or add it.
Now,
Pretty good.
what do you do with this data? Now, it depends on your sellers or it depends on your buyers or whoever you're going to talk to, right? If you have a engineer or somebody that is great with numbers, they may want all this on a spreadsheet with your adjustments to show, what properties you use and what adjustments you made. Most time, they just want to know what value it is. And unless it's something crazy that they don't agree with, they're going to take you for your word because you're the professional. So your clients, and you'll know what approach to take to present this to them. I will say when I first started out, I had an hour and a half long crazy listing presentation that has literally dwindled down to like a good 15 minutes because I've learned that sellers just basically want to know how much and how you're going to do it and how much it's going to cost them. Some obviously there's some situations where if you're being interviewed, multiple agents are being interviewed, you may have to bring more of a show or more stuff. But, don't over bombard or don't, spend time when you don't need to spend time, so to speak.
Remember the one that she was, she said she had.
Yeah, let's do one real quick.
Well, for a buyer that I have.
Okay, that's fine.
An interesting one here in Glendale.
Let's do it real quick. All right, what's the address?
6704 Log Home Drive.
2 words?
Yes, sir.
All right. See, I already don't like it because it's a log home. Oh, I like it because it's a log home, but I'm like, how am I gonna price this?
This is the issue that I'm having.
It's literally.
I'm having a hard time pricing this for an offer.
Oh,
You're
and
trying
you're,
to see if the list price is,
Is what it's worth. They have it for $449.
and it's on 5 acres, so we didn't talk about acreage.
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, and it's 2 bedrooms.
Yeah, I don't know. This one is a tough one.
See, this is where the relationship with that appraiser, you pick up the phone and you say, what do you think?
Yeah,
And they'll do a quick for you, at least mine does, and look over real quick and say yes.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start with this one.
I don't know where do you start.
Put it in the easy CMA and see what it spits out.
Yeah, let's see the easy CMA. I will say we didn't talk about acreage. That's a whole different, subject, but basically in an appraiser's mind, the way they do appraisals is they take the property value out of the equation. So if it's say if, and they're very cut and dry for, and this is my experience. If somebody else has had a different experience, please let me know. They're very cut and dry using tax values. So if it's on a half acre and the tax value of that lot's $50,000, that appraiser is going to take $50,000 out to begin with, figure out what the house is worth, and then add the 50,000 back in. Is that probably a fair way to adjust? Probably not, because obviously we know land has different value, but all they're really worried about is the value of the dwelling itself when they're talking about, the value of the home. As far as making comparables. Yeah, I don't, let's do the easy, let's do that one.
What year was this though? 2001. And the property itself is really nice, like it's built, it doesn't look like it really needs a lot of work at least. When you walk in.
Sometimes, again, that's what the buyer determines the price really at the end of the day. That's who determines what the price is. So if they really like it and the atmosphere and the 5 acres
Are
that
you
you
willing to
can't
pay the
find,
difference?
are you willing to pay for it or
That's
not?
what I told
You
them.
know, it's like,
2,000 square feet. So let's see.
Keith, do you do a quick CMA before even going to listing presentation?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I'll have something in mind because,
a number that tells you what, if the seller is gonna be realistic or.
oh yeah, and I always ask them up front, what do you think?
Yeah,
And then that next 15 seconds are gonna go very great or
right.
it's gonna be rough.
Well,
So
I never go over it with them, then I say I'll get back with you and stuff like that, but I always like having that number because.
yeah, quick
Then you
CMA.
know if they're realistic or not realistic.
Yeah, quick CMA is pulling manufactured homes. They're pulling new construction. It's pulling 2 stories. That is just,
Well, there may not be nothing in
Yeah.
that area,
yeah,
and then you can remove it, and then if anything, go back to your Paragon, MLS or Dornify or whatever you wanna call it now. And then just do what you did 3 miles and see what comes up. There may not be nothing.
Well, the good news is the RVM on this one is saying 465, so let's see what they're.
Ask the listing agent, what comps does she use to come up with the list price?
You can ask that, yeah.
Yeah, she can.
I blame the buyers too. You can blame the buyers. Be like, the buyers just are.
No, just say, we wanna know, we're trying to do, you're trying to do your due diligence, and if they will tell you where they can, they may have gotten an appraiser because of it being a unique property, you know? So,
I didn't think about asking her. I asked for another property, but this one I didn't. It just because it was so.
especially on unique, I mean.
Be careful how you present that too, because I just did it with the same property I was just talking about, and the listing agent perceived it as a slight, like me coming at her like, why are you
Why
pricing?
did you?
I always blame my buyers and say my buyers are having a hard time, or my buyers are seeking more information and I'm having a hard time.
And it's our job
You know.
to,
Unique part.
It's a unique property, yeah.
Like that, hey.
You're being nice.
Well, the good news is
Interested.
the Zillow says it's close. The other one says it's 465. So you're not, something somewhere is pulling these values, but that just is between being a rural home on 5 acres and being a log home, that's a tough one.
I would
Is
ask.
there like a search feature that you can use for the log, like being in the log home,
I don't know. I really would try to reach out to an appraiser and say, is there a difference between us? I mean, is there any value difference? Do you guys give any adjustment for obviously a manufactured versus this home is going to be an adjustment, but would they do an adjustment for a stick built versus
She had to get some help. I mean, you're having a problem, everybody else.
but at the same time, this also kind of leads back into what April was talking. There's an inherent value that may not be recognized by an appraiser, kind of going back to an enjoyment of 5 acres in a log cabin in the middle of nowhere.
Right,
That is gonna add an inherent value for that buyer that may not show up on paper.
right.
Um,
And that's where your buyer, do you want the property? It's unique, it is the way it is, and that determines the value of it.
one thing I would possibly do in this situation is maybe see if there's anything else for sale with acreage in Wendell.
that's what I was using, the acreage.
But at the same time, like I said, you're talking about so many different, now when you start pulling properties on acres, they're all gonna be unique.
yeah.
Because they're all gonna be, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna be custom built, and I'm not talking about necessarily it has to be custom built like a mansion, but it's gonna be, somebody got a builder and they didn't build a neighborhood, they just came out here and built this one house.
Old farmhouse.
Mhm. So in Wendell, there's only 3 houses over 3 acres, and that's not helping us, because the other 2,
How far back did you go, 6 months?
yeah, I'm gonna go back a little farther. Or I'm sorry, that's just, that was just active, and
That was over 3 acres.
yeah. Yeah, it's just all over the place. Yeah, that's a tough one. All right, any other questions? Hold on, let me see what I got on the chat, sorry. Oh, no problem, Angie. Thank you guys for hanging on Zoom. Does anybody on Zoom have any questions? Anybody here have any questions? I hope it was helpful. Like I said, I don't have the organized PowerPoint, because I'm just like to go with the flow, so I hope the information was helpful. Keep the appraisals, for the reference of the adjustments.
Thank
Do you have a copy of those?
Yeah.
Come on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you all.
Are you gonna be on there? Because I like to do the ethics and the elective, like.